Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. As long as the spirit soul is covered by the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, he is bound to the results of his fruitive activities. Because of this covering, the spirit soul is connected with the material energy and must accordingly suffer material conditions and reversals continually, life after life. So what's the cause of our suffering? Identification of the body, which is caused by the subtle. What's the word here for subtle body? Linga, yes. The living entity is bound by the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego. At the time of death, therefore, the position of the mind becomes the cause for the next body. It was confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. What verse is Prabhupada going to quote? That would be a good one. That the mind is the cause of the next body. Yes. What verse is that? 6. Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam twajachante kalevaram. Smara means to remember. Ante, the end of life. Twajachante, to give up at the end of life. At the time of death, the mind sets the criteria for the spirit souls being carried to another type of body. If a living being resists the dictation, now Prabhupada's telling us the problem, now he's going to tell us what to do about the problem. If the living being resists the dictation of the mind and engages the mind in the loving service of the Lord, the mind cannot degrade him. So what are the two things here that Srila Prabhupada is telling us to do? Resistance and engagement. Okay. The duty of all human beings, therefore, is to keep the mind always engaged at the lotus feet of the Lord. Savai Mana Krishna Padada Vindaya. What's that verse from? Ambarish Maharaj, yes. Where in Bhagavatam? 8th canto. When the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Krishna, the intelligence is purified, and then the intelligence gets inspiration from the Supersoul, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. What's that from? Bhagavad Gita? Where? 10th chapter, right. Okay. It's one of the 4 essential verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Thus, the living entity makes progress towards liberation from material bondage. So Prabhupada's giving here a progression. First, you do what with the mind? Engage and 2 things. Resist and engage. If you resist the mind and engage it, then next thing in the progression is the... Should we read it again? Okay. When the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Krishna, the intelligence is purified, and then the intelligence gets inspiration from the Supersoul, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Thus, the living entity makes progress towards liberation from material bondage. So what's the progression? Intelligence becomes purified. So first you have to do what 2 things with the mind? Resist and engage. And then, next thing? Intelligence become purified, and then you can get inspiration from the Paramatma, and then you can make progress. He's telling you, then you can hear him. It's like you've turned up the volume on your, what do you call them, tom-toms? And you can hear where to go. The individual living soul is subject to the laws of fruitive activity. All right, now, we might ask why Prabhupada's going to this topic, and it's not even another paragraph. It seems like it's another topic. So I'd like to try to figure out what's the bridge between what Srila Prabhupada's already said and this. The individual soul is subject to the laws of fruitive activity, but the Supersoul Paramatma is not affected by the fruitive activities of the individual soul. Why is Prabhupada making this point? What does it have to do with what he's just said? We're bound. Because somebody might say, well, what's the good of getting inspiration from the super soul? What good is that? And Prabhupada's saying here, the super soul is not bound like we are. It's free. If you're going to get instruction how to get out of a maze, you have to get instruction from someone who can see the maze. There's no use getting instruction from somebody who's similarly entangled like yourself. So now then Prabhupada's giving evidence. As confirmed in the Vedic Upanishad, the Paramatma and the Jivatma, who are likened to two birds, are sitting in the body. The Jivatma is enjoying or suffering by eating the fruits of the bodily activities, but the Paramatma, who is free from such bondage, witnesses and sanctions the activities of the individual soul as the individual soul desires. So Prabhupada's evidence that the super soul is not entangled is what? Shastric evidence, and the Shastra is giving the, what is the Shastra saying? Example, analogy of two birds. So this analogy is also given by persons in other spiritual cultures. This idea of two birds, that the Lord and the living entity are two birds. And the one bird is eating the fruit and the other bird is observing. And not only observing, but Prabhupada here says sanctioning as we desire. So this very last section is a whole topic in and of itself. How that everything that's happening to us is only allowed by the sanction of the Lord. Yavalingan vito yatma tavat karma nibandhanam tato viparya yaklesho maya yoga nuvartate. As long as the spirit soul is covered by the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, he is bound to the results of his fruitive activities. Because of this covering, the spirit soul is connected with the material energy and must accordingly suffer material conditions and reversals continually, life after life. Klesho. Suffering. So one of the first things that we hear when we come to the Hare Krishna movement is that we're all suffering. Because the materialists make propaganda that we're not all suffering. That actually life is full of pleasure. Of course, even from the material point of view of sense pleasure, mental pleasure, most people are experiencing sense pleasure and mental pleasure only in little drops throughout their day. It's not that people are experiencing continual material happiness. And even material happiness is not very enjoyable. What to speak of the fact that there's birth, death, old age, and disease, our bodies giving us trouble, minds giving us trouble, other living entities, the weather. And mostly the materialistic person think that the cause of these miseries is their circumstances. This wonderful letter from Srila Prabhupada. He says the neophyte devotee thinks that the circumstances under which the difficulties occurred are the cause of the difficulties, but that is not a fact. So we're thinking, I had this difficulty when somebody was insulting me, or I had this difficulty when I had a stomach virus, or I had this difficulty when I didn't have any money, or I had this difficulty, whatever, when it was cold. Therefore, the cold, or the disease, or the person who was yelling at me is the cause of my suffering. And Prabhupada says, it's not a fact. It's not the cause of our suffering. And we can understand this very simply. All of us have experience that if our mind is fully absorbed in something other than our external circumstances, we're not really very concerned about our external circumstances. We've all had this experience. You know, if tomorrow you're going to be taking a journey to your favorite place, and you're excited, and you're thinking about it, and somebody's rude to you, you probably don't even notice it. Oh well, who cares? I'm going to this place tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Right? You may not even notice it. Or you can be sick, and but if your mind is absorbed in something, you can forget that you're sick. One devotee was telling me how he was so devastated. He was engaged to marry this one girl, and then she said, forget it, I don't want to marry you. And he was for months and months and months, he was devastated. He didn't know what to do. He was so sad, so upset. Why did she do this to me? On and on. And then he told me that one day at work, one of the people at work made false accusations against him, which could not only make him lose his job, but also make him unable to get any other job in the whole area. He'd have a black mark on his record. And that misery was so great, it totally absorbed his mind, and he forgot about his girlfriend. So we find it both ways, right? If something very wonderful is absorbing our mind or something very horrible is absorbing our mind, we lose our awareness of other miseries, isn't it? Right? If our mind is absorbed in something else. And of course, Prabhupada talks about this in Teachings of Lord Kapila. He says, with reference to Stalin, who was afraid that when he had surgery, his enemies would kill him. So therefore, he put himself into a hypnotic trance so he could have surgery without anesthesia. And it's a fact. Actually, anybody can do that. You can absorb your mind in something so completely that even the surgeon's cutting you with a knife and you don't feel it as pain. So that means the source of our suffering is the mind. Even from a biochemical point of view, suffering and enjoyment is all just electrical impulses in the brain. And the mind is interpreting, this is very nice, this is not very nice. It's possible with just some, changing, if the doctors do some difference to the electricity in the brain, you no longer experience pain. Or you take some chemical that blocks those impulses. And you take some morphine or codeine or something. And then you're still getting this, someone's still cutting, but you don't experience it as pain. The mind's been disconnected. It's still happening to the body, but you're not interpreting it as pain. So all of the sufferings are due to the mind. We can also talk about how different people can interpret the same thing differently. Two people are having the same experience, and one considers it painful and one considers it pleasurable. Just like chili peppers. I know one devotee who literally eats chili powder for dessert. I've eaten at their home, and for dessert, he just sprinkles some chili pepper and salt on his plate, and that's what he eats. If his wife gives him some sweet, he puts hot pepper on it to eat it. So for me, that's suffering. If I eat it, I'm just like, oh my God, give me some milk and bananas. But to him, it's enjoyable. So is the thing suffering or is it enjoyable? Prabhupada gives the example of cold water. Is cold water pleasurable or is it painful? So yesterday in Soho, the water was all cold. And the windows are also open in the bathroom, and it was very painful. But just recently I was in Vrindavan, it was 43 degrees, and cold water was very pleasurable. So you can't, the point is that water by itself is neither pleasurable nor painful. It's how we're interpreting it. It's how the mind is interpreting it. So the source of all of our pain and all of our so-called material pleasure is also simply in the mind. Another example is in dreams. So in a dream, we can think, I'm enjoying something or I'm suffering, and nothing's actually happening on the gross level. But we're having the same experiences as if it was happening on the gross level. Right? You taste the food you're eating in the dream. You feel the fear that someone's chasing you. It's all just happening within the mind. We can think about the mind, and just like if you were captured by some enemy and they put you in prison, and then there's someone guarding the prison. It's like when Vasudeva and Devaki were captured by Kamsa, and they're in Kamsa's prison. So you're always guarding the prison, you have guards, right? When Krishna appeared, how did Krishna get out? One of the first things that happened was all the guards fell asleep, right? You can't get out of the prison unless the guards are sleeping. So our main guard is the mind. The mind is acting as the guard, protecting this false ego. You are actually God. You are really the most important person in the universe. And the mind goes back and forth between saying you're the most wonderful person in the universe or you're the most terrible person in the universe. Right? Oh, that's a really bad thing you did. Oh, that's really awful. That's a really good thing you did. And it's constantly chattering about the false self. And it's acting as a guard. The real intelligence of the living entity in our connection with Krishna can't get out of this prison as long as the mind is keeping guard. Of course, we wanted the mind as a guard. Just like if you want to do some nonsense in your room, you think, well, let me sneak and watch a movie. So you lock the door, right? Or even if you just want to sneak and eat maha sweets. Ever anybody do that? Am I the only one who's ever done that? So I remember when I first moved in the ashram of the Hare Krishna temple, one of the things I would do was steal the burfi. Those days we didn't lock it up. So I knew when it would come out and when it was in the pujari room. And I'd sneak up during japa time and sneak a piece of burfi and go into the ashram and lock the door. Right? And if somebody knocks on the door, 1 minute, Prabhu! Right? So if you want to do something naughty, you want to have a lock on the door. Isn't it? So we want to pretend to be God, so therefore we want this guard. We're desiring the guard of the mind. Don't let that super soul into my room. Don't let him tell me what to do. Keep him away. Let me maintain this illusion. And when we hear from the Shastra, after a while we start thinking, wait a minute, this guard isn't keeping me safe, the guard's keeping me in prison. Really this guard is hurting me. I give the example of anger. I say to people, anger is like a shield with spikes on the inside. If you're really angry, everybody stays away from you. So you're kind of protected from people hurting and insulting you. But you're damaging yourself. The scientific evidence is like every time you're angry, it's like drinking huge cups of poison. You're flooding your body with all these poisonous toxins. So when we become tired of the mind, we say, wait a minute, I'm really not that great. I'm really not the controller. I've been listening to you for a long time and I'm getting nowhere. You ever been in a car with somebody giving you wrong directions? Or you stop and ask people for directions and they tell you the wrong way? So the mind's like that. I've been listening to you for a very, very long time, and all I get is more klesha. I follow your directions, and all I get is one body after another after another. The mind is saying, just do this and you'll enjoy. Okay. Just do this and you'll enjoy. Okay. Oh, that didn't work out. Just try this. And then again, as Prabhupada is saying, yam yam bapi sram bhavam, or as Krishna says in the 15th chapter, you get a group of senses grouped around the mind. Maybe I'd like to be Indian. Maybe I'd like to be Chinese. It might be fun to be African. I'm tired of having straight hair. It'd be nice to have curly hair. What if I had red hair? What if I was blind? That would be interesting. Suppose I were a dog. And the mind is going like this, right? Suppose I were very rich. What would it like to be very poor? What if I was a scientist? What if I was this? And then we have these desires, and then we get a body grouped around the mind. And we go on and on and on and on and on. And eventually you say, wait a minute, I don't think this is taking me where I want to go. I'm not achieving unlimited happiness and knowledge and eternal life by following the dictation of the mind. And the pure devotee is outside the prison going, come on, put that guard to sleep, will you? So how do we put the guard to sleep? Well, the problem with putting the guard to sleep, it's kind of like a naughty child. When you have a very young child, the parents are always praying for the child to take a nap. Right? Those of you who have children. When are they going to take a nap? How long are they going to nap for? How many things can I get done when they're sleeping? The child doesn't nap all the time. You also have to engage them in positive work. You have to give them some toys or something to do so they're not getting into mischief. So these are the two things to do with the mind. One is to make sure the mind naps from time to time. Just give it a nap. Let me just chant. You take a nap for a while. I'll play with you later. Okay? And the other is to give the mind positive engagement. So how do we neglect the mind? Well, first of all, Prabhupada uses the word here, resist. We resist its dictation, he says. So the mind is always saying, you're important, you're important, you're important, you're important. Yeah, sure I'm important. Right, I'm important. Whatever. Look, the whole planet isn't very important in the universe. Where was I? I was recently in Bahrain. So some of my friends asked me, where are you? In Bahrain. Oh, where's that? At least everybody knows where London is, right? I tell you where you're in London. Oh, you're in London. But even London's a little tiny dot on the map. And the manor is just a tiny dot in London. And until you get very close to the ground in an airplane, you can't even see that there's people. You only see cars. And I guarantee you, 100 years from now, most of our names will be forgotten. And you think of even the great, great devotees, they're often just lists of names in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Just read through a list of names. Like this one devotee, Parameshwari Das. It says, just remembering his name, you can attain love of God. But it doesn't say much about him. Well, it says his name. So how important are we? Of course we're important to Krishna. We're important to Krishna. Krishna cares about each one of us. But as far as our importance in the scheme of things, we don't have any. So you just tell the mind, look, I'm really not very important. Krishna is important. And the mind also tells us that the things we have to do are very important. So I'm very important, and the things I have to do are very important. I got to take care of this today, and this today, and this, and this, and this person, and this, and I got to contract this. But the things we have to do aren't very important either. I mean, if you think about what was on your really important list 10 years ago, can you even remember? Was that your really important list 10 years ago? Do you even have that to-do list anymore? When I had an inbox, a physical inbox, I don't have one of those anymore, I just have a virtual inbox. When I had a physical inbox, every once in a while I'd go through the whole thing, and some of the things in it had already expired. You just threw them away and you never did them. And after a while you see that it didn't even matter whether you did them or not. In so many parts of the world, I'm only here, I'm not in all those parts of the world, and everything's going on without me just fine. Right? As Shiva Ramar said once when he came here, pretty soon all of us will just be little pictures sitting on the Vyasa-sun for a couple days. And life will go on. Everybody will talk about you for a while, and they'll use your passing as an excuse to equilibriments, and that's it. And life will go on. The deities will still be served, the books will still be distributed, the temple room will still be cleaned. All the heresies in ISKCON will still be counteracted. Whatever it is you're doing, you think is so important. Somehow the universe will go on. So you tell the mind, really all these things, I think they're so important. Or what that person said to me, or how this person insulted me, or how this person treated me. Those things we think are really, really important. But again, somebody insulted us a year ago. Do we even remember? Or 20 years ago. What to speak of the things we thought were really important when we were 3. If you see 3-year-old children, they also think what they want is very important. I want that toy right now. Right? I want to wear the yellow dress. And they'll scream about it for hours. So we just resist this thing of the mind. I'm so important. All these things are so important. I have to forget about Krishna. I have to, space out during my japa. I have to space out during the kirtan because I have so many important things to do because I'm so important. And the mind is also telling us, this is my friend, this is my enemy. This is my friend because they help me. This is my enemy because they hurt me. That's all illusion. I recently was visiting one temple where the temple president years ago had a big conflict with our family. Major conflict. Anyway, when I went there, I was actually helping him and his wife, and he looked at me and he said, how is it that an enemy has become a friend? He said, and I look around and friends become enemies. It works like that. I said, yeah, this concept of friends and enemies, it doesn't last. Someone who's your friend now could be your enemy in the future or vice versa. Prabhupada explains with the story of Chitraketu. Sometimes somebody who's your enemy in a previous life becomes your child in this life. Or your spouse. Right? Your parents, your brother or sister. And we're thinking, this person's my friend, this person's my enemy. Actually, the Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, I see those who criticize me as my friends because they help me to become humble. Therefore, we say, Maharaj Yudhisthira, he never created an enemy. You could say, he never created an enemy. He had so many enemies. But he never had the mentality that somebody was his enemy. This is all coming from the mind. Now, this is good, this is bad. As Krishna Das Kaviraj says, it's not true. And the mind is creating all this just to protect the false ego. So we resist this, we neglect this. We just don't pay it any attention. It's like a little while ago there was a child screaming in here. Did anybody take it seriously? Did anybody think, we have to call an ambulance? We didn't take it seriously. Just, it's a child crying. Children do that. They cry. There he goes again. And none of us are running out of the temple room. What's happening? So the mind is just like that. It's always screaming this or that. Just be quiet. Yes. Or like it says in the 7th canto Bhagavatam, if you're with materialistic relatives and they tell you, do this nonsense, you just say yes. No problem. You don't argue with them. Yes, whatever you like. Arguing with the mind is another trick. The mind says this, well, what about this? And go back and forth. And it spirals you into this thing. I kept you from thinking about Krishna and kept you in prison for another hour, another day. And of course, it looks sometimes like devotional service. Rupa Goswami says there are weeds packed up tightly with the bhakti creeper that look just like the bhakti creeper. And we think following the mind, this is my service to Krishna. Listening to the mind telling me, this thing is very important, and this is very important, and do this, and this person insulted you, and you have to take care of this, and there's this heresy in Krishna. They're not doing this thing properly in the deity worship, and look what they're using in the kitchen. Look what this person said, and look how, you gotta take care of this one. Yes, that's my bhakti. And we get all absorbed in that. And you just laugh at it. The famous Christian writer C.S. Lewis, he said, the thing demons hate the most is to be laughed at. And just laugh at it. You're not me. That's not me. You're something material. You're not alive. You're not a living thing. You're not me. You're not my personality. Yes, you're a guard I hired because I wanted to be in this prison, but I'm really not interested in keeping you on my payroll anymore. Thank you very much. Now just take a nap for a while, please, and let me chant my japa. And just be quiet. And otherwise you engage the mind. Lord Kapiladev said, you use the mind as a hook to capture the Lord. So there's 2 ways of defining samadhi. One kind of samadhi is when you first have pratyadhara, when you withdraw the senses from all external objects and you fix the mind on one point. And another kind of samadhi is where Krishna himself enters the heart and manifests. This is what Rupa Goswami says when he says, when we hear the holy name, we want millions of ears and millions of tongues. And then all the Krishna is dancing in the heart and all the senses become inert. So that is the ultimate samadhi to which we want to attain. But that samadhi is not exactly within our control. That is the Krishna coming and manifesting. Krishna coming to your house. But how do we attract Krishna to come? We put our mind into samadhi. We fix our mind at the lotus feet of the Lord. And we're very fortunate that it's very easy for us to do that in this process that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us. Because Krishna said, right, you go to the forest and you sit on deerskin and you're a complete brahmachari and you're just meditating on the tip of the nose. You don't close your eyes all the way, you might fall asleep. You don't open them all the way because then you might see the deer and get distracted like Bharat. So you have half-closed eyes. And just meditating on the super soul, and your mind is like a flame without wind. And if it wanders, bring it back, wanders, bring it back, wanders, bring it back, wanders, bring it back. Well, that's very difficult to do. And Arjuna even said 5,000 years ago, Chanchulhimana Krishna. I don't think I can do that. So Prabhupada's here quoting Savaimana Krishna Padara Vindayo. So we have a variety of activities with which we can engage the mind. So we don't just have to say to the mind, shh, take a nap. Nice to say that to the mind sometimes. Just take a nap. Be quiet. But we can also say to the mind, okay, let's think about how to spread Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. How can we enlarge the preaching? How can we keep the temple cleaner? How can we make the preparations tastier for Krishna? How can we make more beautiful outfits for Krishna? How can we make a wonderful festival for Krishna? How can we get more people to come to the temple? How can we make the kirtan sweeter? On and on and on and on and on. How can we make films for Krishna? Prabhupada said it's not narrow or stereotype. We can engage the mind on and on and on and on and on. Without thinking that I'm very important or what I'm doing is very important. What is the important thing with what we're doing? That I'm connected with Krishna, that's all. That's what's important. Am I thinking about how to please Krishna? Am I thinking about how to tell more people about Krishna? Am I thinking about how to tell people that Krishna is the most important? And then when you do that, Krishna becomes attracted. And he enters in, he manifests in the heart. As Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, the holy name enters my ear, and it goes to the heart, and then it goes from the heart to my tongue, where Krishna is dancing on my tongue. And that is real samadhi. But that we have to do by engaging the mind. That's our business. We must do that. Just like when Ram and Lakshman were in the forest looking for Sita. So they were told by Kabanda to go find Shobari. You know Shobari? She was a tribal lady who had become a devotee. Something like a lot of us. You know, Mlechas and Yavanas practically like tribals. Somehow or other, Prabhupada's picked this up. Of course, some of you are great souls from birth, but at least people like me were like tribals. So she was a tribal lady, and she had become a disciple of a great guru. And before he left his body, he said to her, Ram is going to come visit you. Someday Ram is going to visit you. So just like Srila Prabhupada, he's told us, if you just follow this process, Krishna will come, right? Same thing. So if you just follow this process, you just chant Hare Krishna and you engage your mind in Krishna's service, someday Krishna will come. So she didn't know when Ram was going to come. He didn't say on this date, at this time, just like Prabhupada doesn't tell us when. You know, one devotee said to me recently, if you do such and such service, Urmila, I bless you, go back to Godhead. I said, yeah, but when? So her guru didn't say when. So she thought, all right, let me prepare. He might come any minute. Like let's say somebody called up and said, the Queen of England is really interested in what you're doing at the manor, and she's going to come by sometime this week. What day? What time? We don't know. Sometime this week. She'll just come by unannounced. So Krishna's going to come. So Ramchandra's going to come. So every day, she cleaned her ashram, and she covered the path with flowers, and she prepared some food. Of course, she was in the jungle, so she couldn't make burfi. She didn't have a stove. She just ate, raw food from the jungle. So she was picking berries. And with, some sorts of fruit, you can tell whether or not it's ripe by the smell, like cantaloupe. You can tell if it's ripe. Or mangoes, you can smell them. Or some fruit you can tell by how soft they are. The kind of persimmons we have in America are like that. But there's some kind of fruit that you really can't tell if it's good or not by smell or by feel. So that's the kind of fruit she had available. You had to eat it to tell if it was good or not. So she was picking all the berries and she was tasting all of them. Now normally we don't do that. When we're cooking for Krishna, we don't taste anything first. Krishna should be the first to taste it, so that's not exactly the proper procedure. But she was a tribal lady. And anyway, she didn't know how else to tell it was good, so she's picking all the fruit and she's tasting each piece of fruit. So each piece of fruit has a bite mark in it. Imagine you come to someone's house, they hand you a tray of fruit with teeth marks in all the fruit. But she's doing this every day. She's cleaning her ashram, she's putting out the flowers on the path. She's picking the fruit, she's checking the fruit, and she's thinking at any moment, when is Ram going to come? 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 She's fully engaging her mind. And of course, one day Ram came. So that is what we also want to do. If we want the ultimate samadhi, where Krishna manifests in our heart. Krishna manifests in our heart means that not only is Krishna there, Radharani must also be there, Mother Yasoda, Nanda Maharaj, Subal, the cows, the Yamuna, Radhakund, Shamakund, Govardhan, all of Krishna's pastimes. Prabhupada said it's like transcendental television. Like there are television waves going through here, but unless you have a set, you can't get it. So actually Krishna is in our heart. Right? I was talking here about the super soul. He's already there. He's already in our heart. But how do we connect with him? We have to have purified intelligence, which means the guard has to be disabled. When the good guys if one of the good guys is in prison and the other good guys want to rescue him, don't they have to first disable the guard? Right? And knock him out somehow. You got to disable the guard. You got to get the guard on your side. Sometimes the good guys do that too, right? They get an inside man on the job who's on their side. But you never fully trust the mind. Never fully trust the mind. That question was asked, why did Lord Rishabdev, who's an incarnation of God, who had all mystic powers, why did he not display his mystic powers? And the answer is given that when you capture wild animals, you never fully trust them. You always keep an eye on them. Or I think about, again, little children, like 2-year-olds. You never fully trust them. You don't say, okay, now they're just going to be good. You really learn that with the first kid. You think, oh, they're being so quiet. Oh, good, I'll clean the kitchen. And then you find out the reason they're being quiet is that they've put all the paper towels and toilet paper into the toilet and poured a bottle of oil into the bathtub and all kinds of interesting things. So you don't trust the mind. Even if you've disabled your guard, or even if you've gotten the guard on your side by bribery or whatever, you always keep an eye out. You always keep an eye out. Make sure the guard is either being resisted or being properly engaged. And what is the proper engagement for this guard? Preparing to receive the Lord. Okay, my dear mind, put flowers on the path, clean the ashram, pick the berries, because Krishna's coming. Listen to the chanting, be absorbed in your service. And anytime the mind goes, but that's all right. Let's do this first. Afterwards, we can talk about me. Let's right now just serve Krishna, okay? And you engage the mind like that in Krishna's service. And when you do that, then the heart becomes filled, instead of with lust, anger, envy, greed, and illusion, it becomes filled with affection. Prabhupada says Krishna has manifested us because he wants to enjoy our affection. So our heart becomes filled with affection for Krishna. And as our heart becomes filled with affection for Krishna, we naturally want to surrender to Krishna. And as we surrender to Krishna, our life becomes a great adventure. Our life becomes a great adventure. We become part of Krishna's story. We become part of Krishna's pastimes. Not just to see the pastimes taking place in the heart, but to enter into those pastimes. And that's done even in this life, entering into Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela. And then everything we do, as Prabhupada says, becomes a thrill at every moment. So then instead of klesha, we have unending thrill. So the main essence of yoga is this controlling the mind. Whatever kind of yoga there is, the purpose is to control the mind so that the false ego can be dismantled and we can once again enter into our relationship with Krishna. So today is also the appearance day of Gadadhar Pandit. I thought we'd speak just a few minutes about Gadadhar Pandit. Gadadhar Pandit, as we know, is Srimati Radharani, but although he's Srimati Radharani, he's not in Radha's general mood. He's in a very submissive mood, more like Rukmini or Chandravali. And he's the friend of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from the time that they're very young. They're childhood friends. Right? One time, Gadadhar Pandit was sitting with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when they were young. And the Lord said to Gadadhar, "Where's Krishna? Where is Krishna?" And Gadadhar said, "He's in your heart." And he started taking his nails and started tearing, scratching at his chest. And Sachi Devi got all distracted and distraught. And then he said, "Gadadhar, save my Nimai." And Gadadhar said, No, not like that. Not like that. Krishna's coming soon. He's coming. It's all right. And then Nimai became pacified. Of course, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to Jagannath Puri, Gadadhar Pandit also went. And Gadadhar Pandit took a vow of what's called Kshetra Sannyas. He was a renunciate, and he was serving the Toda Gopinath deity, and he'd taken a vow that he would never leave the deity's service. So we have some devotees like that in ISKCON. We have some devotees who will constantly travel, and we have some devotees who never travel. Right? We have some devotees who practically never leave the temple where they stay. I think we have one like that here. I think he's left the property like 3 times in 40 years. There was one devotee recently in Vrindavan who left his body, who also had, I think he'd either never been off the property or been off the property once or twice in 30 years. So this was the vow that Gadadhar Pandit had taken. I'm going to just stay here in Jagannath Puri. Right? Different kinds of austerity. Traveling is an austerity, and staying in one place no matter what happens is another kind of austerity. So that was his vow. I'm just going to serve the deity no matter what happens. Okay? No matter what. Just like when Shalva was attacking Dwarka, when Krishna was in Indraprastha after the Rajasuya sacrifice. So the soldiers were very much harassing all the citizens of Dwarka, but the Yadu soldiers all stood their ground on the battlefield. They were determined, if we die, we'll go to heaven, and if we live, we'll enjoy the earth. This is our duty to Krishna, to stay here and fight. They didn't move from their positions on the battlefield. So that's like the kshetric sannyas. So he took this vow. But then when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was going to travel, Gadadhar Pandit said, I want to come with you. Well, Chaitanya said, well, how can you come with me? You have this vow. Oh, to hell with my vow. I want to come with you. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no, you can't come with me. You have to keep your vow. The Lord really likes for his devotees to be known as honest, respectable people. Not every parent's like that. That was one of the problems many of our parents had when we joined the Hare Krishna movement. You know, what's your daughter doing? Well, she's in the underground selling Hindu books. Living in a closet in an ashram somewhere. It's embarrassing for them, right? They want to say, oh, my daughter's a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. So Krishna also wants to say nice things about his devotees. He doesn't want to say, oh, my devotees are liars and cheaters and thieves. So if the devotee wants to break their promise, Krishna says, no, you can't do that. You've got to make sure you keep your promise. So he told Gadadhar Pandit, look, you've got to be a religious, righteous person. Otherwise people criticize God. If the devotees are irresponsible, people lose faith in religion. Doesn't make Krishna look very good. Doesn't like it. However, there is a higher principle. That Krishna is very pleased by love that's so intense that it transgresses ordinary social conventions and morality. Not because the person doesn't care about social conventions. No, for Krishna I can steal. That's sitting on the strength of chanting. Well, I'm a devotee, I can do anything. I'm doing it for Krishna, No, that's not what Krishna's interested in. But love that's so strong that you just don't care. Never mind. Somehow I have to see Krishna. Like Vasudeva, who told Kamsa, I'll give you all my children, but one child he didn't give. To save Krishna, I'm willing to lie to Kamsa. Okay. So Gadadhar Pandit said, to be with you, Lord, I'm willing to break my vow. Lord Chaitanya kept saying, no. So Gadadhar Pandit followed them. He broke his vow. He followed, but he followed on another path. And he would just meet up with them in the evening. What are you doing? Go back. No, I want to be with you. Finally, at a certain point, Lord Chaitanya said, all right. You've broken your vow already. You've come far enough that you've broken your vow. Are you happy now? Be satisfied. Go back. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got in a boat and left. And Gadadhar Pandit fainted on the shore. And that is the love of Gadadhar Pandit. And when he would read the Bhagavatam, he would cry so much that it would wash off the ink. We didn't have books like this. It was just handwritten with ink on leaves. And of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur worshipped Gaur Gadadhar. If you go to his house across the Jalangi in Swarupganj, you can see his deities of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Gadadhar Pandit. And he has one wonderful, wonderful song where he ends with just worship Gaur Gadadhar. Meditate on the pastimes of Gaur Gadadhar. So very, very sweet. This relationship that when Krishna takes Radharani's mood, if I'm going to play somebody in a drama, sometimes people do a movie or a play of people who are still living, and what they'll often do is consult with those people. Tell me how to play you. You ever heard about that? The actor or the actress, they'll consult with the real person. They'll watch how they dress, how they walk. How do I play you? So Radharani comes to assist Krishna in taking her own mood. That's the role of Gadadhar Pandit. How do you enter into the mood of Radharani? She comes to support him in that mood as a very dear friend. So thank you very much. We have just a couple minutes. If there's any questions, comments, additions, subtractions, chastisements,